And once we have the user slash initial setup in place, now let's set up two placeholders. One for a register user, and the second one is going to be for the login user. And both of these functions we will invoke at different times in the register one. So if the user wants to register, then of course, once we submit, we will invoke register user. And if the user is already a member, then we'll invoke the login user one. Now, both of them will communicate with our backend. And therefore, we are going to use create async thunk. We need to set up an action. So in the register function, of course, it's going to be user and then register. And then for the login one, it's going to be corresponding to the login. And then remember, when it comes to parameters of the callback function, the first one we can pass in when we invoke, which is going to be in the register. So notice we'll dispatch and we'll pass in the user object. And the same is going to be for the register user. And the second thing is going to be thunk API, which we will utilize a little bit later on. Now we're not going to set up extra reducers yet. We only want a console log here, even though this function does return a promise since it's async. For now, I simply want to set them up as placeholders. Then I want to import them in the register.js, as well as use selector and use dispatch from React Redux. I want to grab the is loading and user, something that we'll use later, using use selector and then store user. And also let's invoke use dispatch. And once we have access to the dispatch, then I want to set up if condition. If the user is a member, remember that is a state value, then I want to dispatch login user. So currently our placeholder. And I want to pass in what? Well, for the login user, we only need email and password, correct? Now we do want to return, if that's the case, if it's a member. Otherwise, if it's not a member, then we invoke dispatch, register user, and we pass in everything. We pass in name, email, and password. Again, for now, we'll just see these two console logs. One is going to be register user with one user object, because notice how I'm assigning that object to a user. And the second one is going to be for the login one. And also, as a side note, starting from this video, I'm not going to keep anymore the small browser window side by side. There's really no point. So first, let's go to user slice. We already have create async thunk. So right after the initial state, we want to go with export. So we want to right away export. We'll say register user. And let's go with create async thunk. And here, first we want to pass in the user and register user. So whatever is the name of the action, and that is my name. And then we want to go with async. Let's pass in the user. So this is something that will be passing from the register. And then the second parameter is the thunk API, which is something we're going to use a little bit later. Now in the function body, let's just go with template string. We'll say register user, and let's access the user. And you know what? Just for fun, let's place a colon. Let's save this, and now quickly copy and paste. And we just need to change some values around, where this is not going to be register user. This is going to be a login user. Same over here for the action. We'll go with login user, and then same in the login user. Then we're going to go to the register. And like I said, we want to grab two things. Use selector, use dispatch from React Redux, and login user and register user from the user slice. And this is the case where I'll try the auto import. So let's keep on scrolling. And first, let's set up the use selector. So let's say here, use selector. And in here, let's pass in the store. And let's say that we're looking for store and then user. Remember, that is essentially our store at the moment. Now, from that store, what do I want to get? Well, I want to get user and is loading. Both of the things that will use a little bit later. Well, then we also want to set up the dispatch. So dispatch that is equal to use dispatch. Let's invoke that as well. And then let's keep on moving. And where we have the submit, first we have the check. So essentially in here, we're just checking for empty values. And as a side note, let's also place a return here. So let's set up the condition if is and member. And if that's the case, let's dispatch the login one. So login user. Now we automatically import that from the slice. We want to invoke it, but we do want to pass in some values, correct? Now for the login one, what do we want to pass in? We want to pass in the object, since this is what I expect in the placeholder function. Essentially, I already gave it a name of user. And second, inside of the object, I want to pass in the email and the password. And for now, let's do the long way. And then for register, we'll use the shorthand, just so you can see that essentially they're the same. Now we do want to go with a return here because we don't want JavaScript to keep on reading. So if we hit this condition, essentially, once we're done with this logic, we want to return from this function. And then at the very end, we want to go with dispatch. And then let's set up a register user. And then in this case, what we want to pass in again is the object. But now let's use the shorthand. So email, name, as well as the password. And once we're done with the setup, now let's go to the big screen and let's test it out. So it's localhost 3000, register. Okay, awesome. And we'll definitely be able to see everything in the console, but we'll also be able to see the actions here in the Redux DevTools. So first, let's try it out, where I'm going to go with john@gmail.com. Then let's pass in some kind of password. Let's click. Notice, initially we have the pending, and then we have the fulfilled. Now again, we're not changing anything in state, but at least we can see that we're dispatching those actions with those placeholders. And now let's click on register, and then let's just add a name. So in this case, I'm going to go with John. Let's again click. Again, we have two actions. First one is pending, and the second one is fulfilled. And for both of them, here we have register user, and then the first two are login user. And if we take a look at the console, in here we'll have the login user, and then we have object, and the second one is also object. Now, if we do want to see actually what we're passing in, why don't we do this? Why don't we say here JSON stringify? So let's say here JSON, then stringify, and then let's pass in the user. And the same thing I want to do here. So let's change this around just so we can see what we're dealing with. Now it looks like I'm missing here some kind of parenthesis or something. Let's save. Let's test it out one more time. John, Gmail. Let's go with secret. And once we log in, check it out. Now I have login user, and this is what eventually will be sending to the server. And of course, if I go here with register, and if I add the name, if I submit, check it out. Now we have login user as well as the register user. So email, name, and all that. So all of these values we will send either to the login route or to the register route. And once we have this in place, now let's get familiar with different HTTP methods.